All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome. I hope you all had a restful evening and now you're ready for this plenary. But I'll start this plenary with a question. If I were to ask you, what is the largest living thing that you know that exists on this universe or in this universe? What would your answer be? Largest living thing. I'll take that. What would you say if I said New York City? It grows, it breathes, as cities do. Some cities breathe a bit better than the others, but so there you are. I mean, and that brings us to the topic to be discussed today. In preparation for this plenary, I was reading up a bit, and then I identified this fact about the fastest growing cities in Asia in terms of the volume of population increase per year. So 10 out of those 20 cities are from China, 6 from India, 2 from Pakistan, 1 I think is Istanbul and 1 is Dhaka. So if you compare the natural increase in population in China and compare it to how fast these cities are growing, one natural conclusion is that it's immigration, which is new people who are moving into cities. And that also connects to the dire need to make these cities livable. So we will explore today a topic that I think touches all our lives, whether we are development professionals or we're just citizens living in cities, right? Cities are where opportunities and diversities converge. But they are also where inequality and infrastructure gaps are most visible. As urban populations grow, the question isn't just how to build more cities, but how to build better ones. And for those of us working here in development policy and evaluation, understanding how to measure and improve livability, it is very, very critical. This session will explore, and it will be a platform for sharing experiences and innovations in urban development with a special focus on infrastructure, climate resilience, and social inclusion. We'll hear insights from recent evaluations of ADB support for livable cities and climate interventions and explore how evidence can guide us in addressing real-world urban challenges. I think that if you all see a QR code here, may I please request you to download this Menti QR code? I'll ask you more questions. Just let me know when you're done. Some phones are still up, so I'll allow you 30 seconds more time. Okay. Okay, I think we're... How many registered so far? 49 people registered so far. Anybody else who wants to register, we'll just give you a couple of more seconds. Okay. Let's go with some questions. The objective of this is to actually set the discussion that is to follow in its context. Which Asian city, considered one of the least livable in the 1970s and 1980s, has now transformed into a global model for urban livability? Options are Bangkok, Thailand, Jakarta, Indonesia, Seoul, South Korea, Manila, Philippines, or Bangalore, India. Wow, okay. So 24 people went to Seoul, South Korea, which is correct. No, it's not Bangkok, Bangladesh. Give yourself a big pat on your back. That was simple. Okay. What is the topmost commonly used parameter to judge urban livability in Asia? Now, I know it's a very broad question. These parameters differ from country to country, city to city, but generally speaking, what would you think are the parameters that are commonly used to judge urban livability? The questions are there. Is time up? Its time is up. Okay, so a little bit of a surprise there. It seems that safety, that is crime rates and political stability, is one of the top indicators. Healthcare seems to be second, availability, affordability, and quality. Infrastructure, which is the first here, seems to be third. Public transport, road quality, digital infrastructure. Environmental quality, well, I'm from India, I would put that at the top. Especially Delhi, air quality, green spaces, pollution levels, and then cost of living. And as I said, there are really no right answers because it's very, very specific to where you are. I mean, the parameters in India would vary from those from, Pacific Island countries, which brings me to the next question. Which Pacific Island country is considered a pioneer in integrating climate resilience into national urban planning strategies? The options are Fiji, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, Vanuatu, Marshall Islands. Am I hiding Fiji? Well, yes, it is Fiji. Fantastic. Well done, all, those of you who voted for Fiji. And my last question. Which Asian city ranks just behind Singapore in innovation and livability thanks to its smart mobility, public safety, and urban planning? I had to put second to Singapore because all the questions that I was thinking of led to Singapore. So it is which Asian city ranks just behind Singapore in innovation and livability thanks to its smart mobility, public safety, and urban planning? Okay, so yeah, that's not Asia. So let's just pretend Copenhagen is Seoul, Stockholm is Tokyo. Okay, so the correct answer is Tokyo, Japan. Sorry about that. It's technology, it fails sometimes. Okay, so now that I think somewhat we've set the context for today's discussion, we have a great group of panelists, and I'll invite them one by one on the stage. But before that, I'm going to invite the senior evaluation specialist and team leader for a very, very nice evaluation on livable cities, Shin, to come and make a presentation to once again go deeper and set the context for today's discussion. Song?
Good morning. Thank you, Salia, for the introduction and some of very interesting questions that kind of got us started related to this interesting topic. Um, so, as Celia mentioned, I work for ADB, Independent Evaluation Department. As you're aware, our role is to assess ADB's performance, how it's achieving its intended objectives, not only in accountability aspect, but also learn from that, how we can become better. And as we're all aware, evaluation plays a critical role in that aspect. So I would like to share some of the recent evaluation IED is working on in terms of this particular topic. Now, some may ask, how would this tie to 10th year AEW theme, navigating crisis, building on success? Now, depending on how we define crisis, maybe it's all relative, but as you see on the photos on your left, some of us deal with a daily crisis in terms of traffic, pollution aspect, and if there's nothing done in terms of improving some of those aspects, it could really lead to crisis as we have observed throughout history. So this evaluation is intended actually to learn from some of ADB's experience, but for this opportunity, I wouldn't necessarily want to get into too detail in terms of how ADB is doing, but through this evaluation, I think could provide some of the interesting insights, how we can kind of learn from each other through ADB's experience, and I'm sure a lot of colleagues here has also different experience that we could also learn from. So I'll start with some of those contexts, and this is just a preview. This evaluation is still ongoing, will become public for those who are interested in later this month. So if you're interested in more details, feel free. But I would just like to share some of interesting findings from this evaluation. So as we just went through exercise, the term livability could vary depending on the member country's priority and needs. So it's hard to specifically define what livability means under that context. But for our evaluation, we did look into some of the definition different multilateral development partners have that captures some of the livability. I wouldn't necessarily go one by one, but some of these examples show that there's definitely the commonality aspect, but also in some cases, the term is a bit vague. Accounting that depends, it varies. But one of the challenges, depending on how we tailor that definition, we could actually maximize the intervention, the effect we can bring if we could focus that, and especially with constrained resource on what we can support member countries, the more idea we have in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of enhancing livability, we'll be able to have a better grasp of how we can structure our support accordingly to maximize its effect. So the reason I just wanted to share this slide is that there's no like one size that fits for all purpose in terms of the livability. And as with a lot of other topics that it's difficult as we evaluate because it's so complex and multi-sectoral or multi-thematic. And the problem itself is very, adds additional complexity that we're trying to tackle. So it adds another challenge to that aspect. So the importance of urban livability, I wouldn't necessarily go one by one, but as Celia just mentioned during the introductory remark, the Asia-Pacific region is one of the most rapidly urbanizing region in terms of population and the concentration of the cities. So unless we act quickly in terms of not only addressing existing problems, but how we can prepare for the future, that it's really going to lead into crisis if we're not better prepared. So evaluation does have an important role, like other topics, in how we can make it work. And also, it's a critical element in terms of economic growth and ensuring social equity, and also preserving environment at the same time, making the environment most suitable for the residents. And obviously, it takes resource. The concentration has mainly been in infrastructure, but definitely there's additional elements to that need to be geared toward enhancing livability. So just to quickly go through ADB support for livable cities, the ADB has been supporting developing member countries to address the challenges in terms of making more clean, inclusive, and resilient environment. You see on the graph toward left some of the trend of ADB's commitments in terms of loans, grants, and technical assistance that it has been increasing, showing increasing trend. And ADB also, through different strategies, has developed specific measures in terms of operational plans to focus on how ADB can better support member countries. One of the representative is the cover that's captured on the slide. Just initial findings show that ADB had done its due diligence in terms of incorporating the urban operations through different strategy and the country partnership strategy aspect. But also one of the constraints is that the livable city portfolio generally aligned, but was focusing more on the infrastructure component. And again, the context of livability captures so many thematic and sector aspect, it's difficult to cover all of them. But if those are not well thought through, then definitely there's gonna be a limitation in how it could be better delivered. It did also show that the importance of more rigorous and integrated urban sector assessment to improve the prioritization, and some of the ADB's efforts showing national urban assessment is shown throughout the years. Also, as we hear a lot of times, the project results indicator in terms of monitoring and evaluation is also an issue related to this aspect. How we can measure the outcomes, how we can design the project elements better to better monitor and evaluate seems to be also challenging, especially pertaining to this complex topic. So based on the evaluation, we did identify some of the operational approaches that could help. Some of these ADB has tried to implement throughout, but again, I'm just raising this so that we can learn from each other, because I'm sure some of these topics is relevant to also efforts our colleagues are carrying through. The importance of enhancing institutional arrangements to facilitate more cross-sectoral and thematic operation accounting. The livability concept itself requires collaboration throughout different stakeholders, which requires more institutionalized upstream assessment. And also within the organization, how we can best capture some of the capacity gaps, because we do need expertise on various aspects. But not only having separate knowledge, but how we can integrate that to achieve the purpose of capturing these multi-thematic aspects. Also bringing more intensely engaging different levels of audience, especially not just national government, but also different stakeholders, including the local government units, to see what their needs are, understand better, and to try to address accordingly what their issues are from the onset of the project planning and implementation and design, so that those are adequately captured. And then one of also the most important aspect is collaboration among different stakeholders, which include multilateral development partners as well as government agencies, how we can work together, especially related to these cross-sector elements to better position ourselves in collaborating, in bringing results. So I'm almost done, just the last slide. So way forward, I try to just snapshot what we were thinking. Some of the findings from this evaluation is, as you see, the importance of operationalized, integrated outcome-focused, and context-specific interventions supported by strong diagnostics, and then strengthening monitoring and evaluation as mentioned, and also tailoring internal organizational arrangements to better support this cross-sectoral priorities. And last but not least, the scale of direct lending to local governments and engage more at a local level. Definitely, there's always challenges in terms of whether there's capacity or not. But if we really want to make difference, maybe some of the upfront effort in terms of strengthening institutional capacity could play a critical role. And what you see on these recommendations is, interestingly, evaluation plays a critical role on most all of them in terms of not just post-completion, but even project preparatory efforts. Evaluation does play an important role. So I would like to, through this exercise, understand better the important function of evaluation on carrying out, not just livable city concept, but in other aspects of what we're doing. And I would just like to close my presentation in thanking my colleagues in performing this evaluation, who some of them are actually present here, and also thanks to Sherry, who put some colorful touches on this presentation. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Sung, your job doesn't end there. You have to be a panelist as well. So let me introduce you to the rest of the panelists now. We have with us Dean Karlan, Professor of Economics and Finance, Co-Director, Global Party Research Lab, Northwestern University. You all have met him yesterday already. Dean? Sure. And to give the government perspective, we have Nino Purtskhvanidze, Head of the Department, Infrastructure Policy and Development Partners Relations Department, Ministry of Infrastructure of Georgia. Georgia country. Marife Apilado, Director, Portfolio Management Division, Private Sector Operations Department, the ADB. Junhan, Deputy Chief Executive Officer, Economic Promotion and Strategy, Sino-Singapore, Tianjin Eco-City Investment and Development Company Limited. And to moderate today's session, may I call on stage Manny Jimenez, Director General, Independent Evaluation Department. Manny, the panel is all yours now.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thanks a lot, Sung and Saleha, for setting the stage so well for this conversation that we're going to have on what I have to agree is a personal daily crisis for some of us who need to combat congestion and air pollution going to work in order to ensure that we're living among the bright lights that we so dearly love. So we're going to try to have a conversation and basically generally try to divide it into two main parts. One is be interesting to get the perspective of our colleagues here from their different points of view on the various aspects of livability that they have most in mind, and what the challenges are to that. And then we want to end on a positive note, of course, so we want to spend the second part to talk about possible solutions and what might work going forward. So, Dino, if I might start with you from, from the developing country perspective. You saw in the survey that, surprisingly actually, the world didn't think that infrastructure was the topmost aspect of livability. But you're among friends here because everybody in this room thought that infrastructure was the most important aspect. So you're the head of infrastructure policy and development, partner relations in the Ministry of Infrastructure of Georgia. And you're, I'm sure, on a daily basis, having to engage on these issues. If you could tell us from your perspective, what are the main challenges and constraints in Georgia as you grow rapidly, but also try to address these issues of the quality of life among the Georgian citizens?
Okay, good morning, everybody. It is really an honor to be here with you and discuss such an important topic, I guess, for all of us. It was not surprising to me to see the result of the survey, no, because I do believe that there is no one particular definition what is the livable city mean, because cities around the world, I guess, have different problems, different needs, they are at different level of development. That's why we got different answers, I guess. I'm from Georgia, and to give you a little background, it is a very small country with roughly 3.8 million population. So I guess it's maybe one district of this city, I don't know. So, and half of this population live in the capital city. So while thinking about the concept of the livable city, for me, our challenge is to, for the one hand, to concentrate on the capital city and to enhance and develop already existing infrastructure, maybe with some kind of technologies, with smart solutions. But on the other hand, we do have, I guess, remote cities around the country, and we try to invest in the regions of Georgia in order to somehow minimize the disparities between the capital city and the other cities. So while thinking about the constraints and challenges, for me, I will put first Georgia's geographical and climatic conditions, because we got quite a lot of high mountainous areas and remote areas, and in order to deliver the infrastructure projects, they are sometimes becomes challenging. As a small country, our market is also very limited as well. And the private sector needs quite a lot of resource mobilization in order to spread the activities and deliver the constructions, because we got some kind of limited window for the construction works, I will say 5 months in a year. This kind of challenge arises in our case, and we try to find some kind of solutions. And for water sector, I will also put as a challenge that, I don't know, maybe other countries have the same problem as well, but tariff issue is a quite problematic aspect in our case, and cost recovery through tariffs paid by the customers is quite a sensitive topic for us.
Thanks very much, Nino. I know basically the points you raised about the challenges, and even in a country as small as Georgia, to deconcentrate away from the capital and make sure that the needs of all citizens across the country are met. And a very important issue you raised, which I think we want to get back to later on how to finance some of these investments. As I told you, I must say, having visited Tbilisi a couple of times, that I wouldn't actually rank that as topmost in terms of non-livability. It's one of the most livable cities I've been to, which I would encourage everyone to visit. Juntan, if I could turn to you, the issues that Nino raised, especially on ensuring that climate change is being addressed in cities. You're working in Tianjin for a joint, I guess, China-Singapore initiative to ensure the livability of this coastal city that is not in the capital and is also trying to address perhaps the issue of deconcentration that Nino talked about. So from your perspective, what are the critical challenges as you see it from this medium-sized, in Chinese terms, perspective of a city?
Thanks, Manny. I prepared a short PPT, if I can get the team to pull it up. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Tianjin Eco-City project, but the project is a collaboration between the Chinese and Singapore government to rehabilitate a very polluted wasteland in a part of Tianjin into a highly livable, green, and very ecological city. The project started in 2008. We are now into our 17th year, and we are still building and constructing. And the project started with the idea of doing rehabilitation of polluted land and to turn it into a very high-quality living environment that can be a model for other parts of China that's undergoing very rapid urbanization. And what it did was to bring in Singapore's best practices, ideas of town planning and township development, adapted into the local context of Tianjin, and to try to make this a project that can be replicated and scalable. And so this is what we think is a very useful model for other parts of China to look at. What I will share maybe a bit about what are some of the challenges that we face in running out this project is really about alignment of goals between the many stakeholders. This project, you can imagine, is a very large project. We are about 150 square kilometers in size. There is many stakeholders involved, including the government, including the private sector. I represent the private sector as the master developer. There are many other actors involved. And I think what leads to the success of the project and that we are still going strong is a strong alignment in goals between the many different parties. The idea that we want to make this place successful. We want this place to be a sustainable model. We want this place to be something that can have its own life after the project ends. And that's where that influences all the various decision making between short-term goals and long-term goals, etc. And I think when there's a common alignment between the stakeholders, the project tends to move a lot smoother. I think the other challenge is also about sharing of the benefits and the cost and the risk. I think we talk about bringing in private sector involvement in projects like this. And again, it's about how the profits and costs can be co-shared so that there's enough incentives for private sector to be involved, but there's also enough motivation for all parties to work together to overcome all kinds of challenges that a long-term project like ours will face. And I think those were the two challenges that I think quite key to making us reach this state of the development, and I think would be a good key for how we'll continue to grow this city going forward.
Thanks very much, Juntan, and I'm glad you raised the issue of the challenges in terms of ensuring that all stakeholders are involved, because we can't assume that it's all just government, either national or city, but bringing in the private sector, which I think is a great way to start with you, Marife, on getting the private sector involved, because you, in fact, work in a part of the Asian Development Bank that is trying to support the private sector to grow in these countries, and getting them to address the issue of livability is something that Junsen mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and constraints we face within the ADB and other multilaterals in getting that support to our client countries?
Thank you, Manny. Quite interesting question. So invariably, there's a big role to play at the subnational level for promoting city livability and urban development projects. Yet, I think there's a very large room to go in terms of getting stronger and scaling up this area, because let me start with risk perception of the market. Private sector capital, specifically, investors generally see subnational financing as considerably riskier relative to sovereign financing, and even with respect to corporate alternatives. I think this stems from a number of factors, Manny. One is limited technical capacity at the city level, for one, where I think there is a need of augmentation and supplementation of cities' ability to design and develop bankable and investment-grade city livability projects that would, for example, meet safeguards and safeguard standards and sustainability standards that would be important gating criteria for private sector investment. Capacity constraints at the fiscal level, I think, would also be a key constraint, especially since a lot of the cities and municipalities in our developing member countries do have limitations in terms of being able to independently raise revenues at that level. A lot of them continue to be quite dependent on internal revenue allocations from the national level. A lot of them would have constraints in being able to pledge assets, for example. And at times, there are legal and regulatory framework constraints in being able to take indebtedness directly, and would need support and clearance and approval at the national level to be able to do so, and even that with significant limits and constraints. For ADB, I think we do have a very strong track record in terms of being able to implement great sector-oriented projects. But I think having those sector-oriented projects get really stitched together for a city livability, cohesive, holistic approach, less so, I think, in terms of being able to stitch together sectoral projects so that they are actually integrated as part of a cohesive urban development plan. I think we're not doing that as well as we should. And I think it's because of partly how we're organized, but also in respect of incentives, I think, for people and staff to actually work in that direction.
Thanks a lot, Marife. Really important questions you raised. In fact, multilateral development banks are organized indeed by sectors, but that's because our clients are organized by sectors. We have sector ministries. So it is a challenge when you have such a multidimensional concept such as livability to address these points. And I would like to get back to that, and also, as well as your other points on the technical capacities and the fiscal capacity to address these issues. But Dean, if I could turn to you, of course, you are an evaluator, a researcher, and someone perhaps with a more developed country perspective on livability. and your own perspective. Just from your overview of the research literature on this issue, what are some of the main challenges you see that ought to be addressed by even more research, perhaps, but as well as policy going forward?
Hi everyone, thanks, and lots of interesting angles to discuss here from a collection of everybody's thoughts. So I want to divide this into two piles in terms of the challenge. There's kind of evaluation challenges and policy challenges. One, and I'm going to say something which maybe is wrong, but which is I don't think it's actually harder. Like everybody always perceives the area they're tackling as particularly complex and intertwined with different sectors. But I hear that across all areas. I've never heard someone say, yeah, evaluation in my space is like super easy. We just boom, 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 done, we know what to do. So, you know, I think we need to recognize that I think there's a bit of an illusion of it being more difficult because we actually know less, there has been less research. The urban space and the attention on urban issues and evaluation of policies in urban areas is younger in the space of development. If we just look at the world of impact evaluation that have been done, most of them come from rural areas because of just the nature of how developing countries and low-income countries have progressed. And so we're seeing more and more attention on cities, both on a policy space and on a research space. But it's not that the issues are inherently more complex. So the way I think about it from a research perspective, from an evaluation perspective, there's kind of three things that make an evaluation challenging in a given context. And I think these are very true in urban, but also true in other contexts. One is, you know, when there's indirect effects. So there's some sort of policy and program that affects some people directly, the kind of adopters of a program, so to speak, and it has influence on other people. And you want to know, but you need to have some way of measuring that in order to have a full understanding of the impact of a program. If you build that into your research, into the evaluation design, then that's great, and sometimes you can do that, but you have to be forward-thinking and knowing that that's there, but that is a challenge. Sometimes if you don't know the process through which it affects indirectly to other people. Second is when the policy is actually at a higher level. It's setting, you know, and this is very true in cities, but it's also very true in rural areas and national policies in various ways. So when the actual intervention itself is simply at an aggregate level, obviously this makes evaluation harder because it's harder to establish a counterfactual. And the third is measurement and quality of data. And the fact that every measure we ever use for anything is almost always a proxy for a concept that we care about. We care about livability. There's obviously no one perfect measure for that. Even something like income, there's no one perfect measure for income. Everything's a proxy. And so we face that constant challenge of how good is this proxy. Now that's one area where I see urban as actually having a little bit of an advantage. More often, the studies that I see, and evaluations I see in an urban context are able to use administrative data more, which have their own limitations because sometimes they're kind of less measurement error, but yet at the same time more complete and in terms of the population, and also, but inevitably they're kind of shallower, right? It's not as rich in terms of the other things. So that's an advantage that I think a lot of urban studies do have. So those are some of the main challenges, as I see it.
Thanks, Dean. No, that's wonderful. I'm so glad you're hopeful that there's no problem that is complex enough that can't be resolved.
I'm not saying that. I just think there's complexity across the space. And
I understand. I understand. But if I could push you a little bit, and going back to your talk yesterday on trade-offs, especially on mantra 1, I think it was yesterday. This is a concept that does have different dimensions, and we saw in the survey, for example, some people care more about some things relative to others. And do you have any insights on how we might try to, based on your experience in how countries actually make these hard choices. Any lessons that you see going forward in this urban space on tackling these different issues of, congestion versus ensuring, for example, that poor people who choose to live in slums in inner cities can still get to work?
No, this is a great question, and actually it segues well to, I think, one of the opportunities. And so in the embedded lab, or the evidence partnership that I described, there's a partnership in South Africa with the city of Cape Town, with JPAL and the Jameel Communities Foundation, that is funding and basically what I described in the talk yesterday, where there's this evidence partnership looking at pre-existing data, trying to understand what are the questions the city government has, what can they answer with existing data, what new experiments and randomized trials run. So they're tackling a series of questions that are effectively getting at elasticities, which is fundamental to the question you're posing, is to understand how much, if you do change prices on everything from congestion and commuting to utilities and things like this, how much do people change behavior? And that's fundamental to then understanding the revealed preference of individuals and how they are trading these things off. And it's also, so this is a great example of where this is the question the city government's asking. And so as part of this evidence partnership, the first step was just using the pre-existing data to try to understand how sensitive are people to these prices. When prices change, how much do they change behavior? What are they revealing they value congestion against other dimensions of life and things like this? But then one of the things they learned is that people were, for instance, very inelastic to water pricing in a way that seems unrealistic, which made them think that people might not understand the water pricing as it's coming to them, because the bills were not, just that there might be a consumer protection thing to do. So that motivated a series of experiments that they're now doing to understand how well do people understand the prices that they're actually facing. Because if you want to use that kind of approach to answer your question, people need to understand the prices, right? Otherwise, you're going to make the wrong assumption. And that's basically what they discovered, is that they don't think people understand the pricing. And they need to improve the way that's communicated, because, I think we've all experienced this in our own life. We probably, I know I've gotten bills before that I just fundamentally don't understand. My cell phone bill, I still don't understand it, right? And so this is no different in utilities sometimes. And so the work there is to say, how do you improve these bills so that people understand them? And then let's see how sensitive they are so that we can tackle the question you're posing better.
Thanks. I wonder if I could ask Nino and Juntan a similar question in terms of how do you align preferences among the different stakeholders? And are they, in case they're different, and Dean just raised the point that perhaps different citizens may have different perspectives from each other. They may have different perspectives from politicians. So in Georgia, how have you grappled with this really thorny problem?
Very tough question. I would say that the very big factor is the number of, I guess, people who are, let's say, on pro to something. So in terms of the quantity, it matters. So who are supporting the idea or not. But when it comes to the selecting of the project, I guess we strictly stick to policy directions which are priorities for the countries. Let's say Georgia is the part of the middle corridor. If the project is aligned to this direction, this project will be selected. For instance, if the program or a project idea is in line with the energy independence, this project will be selected, whether it is somehow supported or not. But during the, I guess, public hearing and etc., how actually you deliver the project, there is a, we discuss stakeholder engagement, social and safeguard issues and etc. During this process, how you deliver the final outcome, then I guess all the stakeholders matter, and especially amount of the population, for instance, amount of the businesses who are supporting the ideas, this also take into the consideration. So I cannot say that there is a concrete answer that this matters, this does not matter, because it should be evaluated in a whole way and then discussed and made the decision in the final decision after these consultations.
No, great, thanks. And maybe that relates back to Marife's point about the challenges ADB has had on ensuring that our client countries meet our safeguards and technical requirements. But before I turn back to you, Marife, Jinten, especially for the private sector perspective, in your experience, what kind of stakeholder engagements do you do, not just among investors, but perhaps the beneficiaries as well of and the citizens in Tianjin or elsewhere?
Great question. I think building a township is a very complex problem, and it's a very long-term issue. So there are a lot of complicated and complex decision-making that has to go into it. Just to respond to the earlier question, in China there is a saying. They say that it is 要算大账. It means that you have to count the big sums. And it basically means that there may be different stakeholders with very different agenda. There may be very different stakeholders who have to make decisions that results in very different trade-offs for different parties. If you look at a single project basis, there may be certain costs that outweighs the benefit. But the city has to move forward. Decisions still have to be made. And so a certain approach is about looking at how do you look at decision making in a very comprehensive manner, knowing that you can't always have the benefits outweighing the cost, and looking at the overall benefits that a township could gain. And that's a principle that we sometimes use in terms of negotiating trade-offs, negotiating differences between stakeholders, between with a government, etc. And of course, for us, we are in building. We are the master developer. We are in this project for 17 years, and we have many more years to go. So it's inherent in us to be very responsive to the needs on the ground, the needs of the government, the needs of the financial, the economics of the city. So we are all in it in the long run. And so I think what we do is that we have to be quite sensitive to changes around us. We have to listen to our stakeholders. We have many stakeholders, the residents, our shareholders. The government faces many challenges and pressures. And we are all in this together. So I think ultimately the decision making is one that has to be done quite jointly, balancing the different trade-offs.
Just from a practical point of view, I can see how you might get the views of stakeholders like governments and big investors. How do you get what are the ways that the private sector does to get the views of the citizens themselves? You have hearings, do you use Mentimeter? I'm just interested, I'm just curious how private sector does it.
Well, I think, I mean, if you know the China's context, a lot of decision making tends to be more top-down and bureaucratic. But I think one simple answer to your question is people move with their feet. So the residents who choose to move into our city votes with their feet that way. And they vote with buying the houses, finding jobs, etc. So that is quite immediate feedback for us.
Great. Marife, if I could turn to you now, and in the second part of our conversation, I said we'd try to look for solutions going forward. And if I could ask you, considering the challenges that we've been discussing now, what does the ADB, and especially the private sector arm of the ADB, what are some of the initiatives that you think are most promising in terms of helping our developing member countries deal with these issues of livability, including several aspects that a couple of you mentioned before, ensuring that the issue of sustainability is addressed, and as Juntan mentioned, how to ensure that we have this long-term perspective.
Thanks, Manny. Many aspects of to that, and maybe just taking off from where Juntan was left off in terms of stakeholder, alignment, which I think is very important for this long-term capital-intensive projects. I think this public-private sector dialogues and forums are particularly important. One that strives to bring various stakeholders, such as city administrators, with investors, with communities, with IFIs that deliver funding, to actually plan together and prioritize, asset planning at the city level through, these inclusive engagements that also hopefully reaches out and involves CSOs in the process would help very much. I think for private sector capital interest, they do appreciate seeing a cohesive, integrated urban strategy that clearly articulates the long-term urban development roadmaps of the cities. Hopefully such also syncing and linking very well with the national priorities agenda. This is actually very important for managing investor expectation. I think the city level, it would be also quite helpful for stakeholders to be able to demonstrate capacity and credibility in both project design, and I mean, financial, technical, and environmental and sustainability due diligence, but also in implementation. And, being able to utilize tools like dynamic data dashboards, digital twins, data capture, and maybe AI-enabled project monitoring schemes would all be very helpful. And then I think quite important also is transparency and accountability, where I think at the city and municipality level, it's very important to be able to increase visibility on their financials, publishing these plans, publishing project implementation updates. All of this together helps build investor interest.
No, thanks. And I'm glad you raised the issue of integrated urban planning, which, as both you and Juntan implied, is really critical to ensure some predictability and safety for investors. Sung, I know that in your evaluation, you really tried to look at, how was ADB doing in terms of supporting urban planning and that kind of exercise. And I wonder if we could talk about that and what you recommended in your evaluation going forward in this.
Me?
Sung, wake up, Sung.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Manny. In terms of urban planning, as indicated, it's obvious that more planning upfront could better prepare projects that would have more effect and value addition. So, as I indicated, ADB has been implementing some of the measures to institutionalize some of those upfront planning components throughout the years. I think one of the challenges, as much as ADB want to implement, also it has to be bought off by our counterparts at member countries because it also boils down to what their priorities are and what the immediate and urgent needs are for those client member countries. So there's obviously the short, mid, long-term needs, how those planning components can be better addressed. And I think ADB has some of those challenges in terms of how to work together. Definitely there were efforts to demonstrate some of the value addition in putting like national urban assessment in some of the member countries, which by the way, Georgia had one of the success cases that led to making difference in terms of not only project preparation, but also building project pipelines, because not only one project solves all the problem, the project need to be phased and sequenced, and different parts of components all need to be built up to make most difference together. And that's where the member countries and ADB and other developing partner could work together toward institutionalizing and collaborating and realizing some of the benefits that if we are able to diagnose what the problem is, then definitely some of the practical solutions in phases and how different resources could add up together could really make difference. So just adding on is that I happen to have also experience in some of the developed countries, and some of the benefits of comprehensive planning does actually help in a way. And with those planning set up, how to get the ownership of not only the political level, but also the residents to actually really buy off on that concept. And together, that could really make difference in shaping the future they want, the ownership, not only at the government level, but at so both top down and bottom up could actually supplement and make a difference.
Thanks, Sung. And I note actually that you were actually born in the city, I believe, that was in this survey that went from the least livable to the most in 20 years, in Seoul. Is that right? Dean, I think we've all, several people have mentioned this issue of the need to do diagnostics and plan accordingly. Now, we've all seen urban plans, great big blueprints that are nice on paper. But in the end, as you pointed out earlier, it's all about how those plans translate into behavioral change. Any recommendations for you on what developing countries, cities, or small, big, ought to do to make sure that their diagnostics are as well informed as possible to address some of these behavioral issues, as opposed to the very neat town plans that we've seen in blueprints?
No, thank you for that. And at the risk of making it sound simple, which it's not, it's really a question of making sure that you're combining kind of the evidence use and the evidence generation together into a partnership. And it's thinking about the problems that the city is facing that are diagnostic, as well as then what to do, right? So two phases, right? It's diagnostic of what the problem is, who the problem is worse for and better for, and then what to do for them. It's like two phases of this. But we need to get out from thinking about those kinds of engagements as projects with an evaluation to them, and instead think about them as partnerships that start off by saying, what are the problems you're facing? And some of those problems can be tackled by diagnostics and understanding those diagnostics, looking at evidence from elsewhere, figuring out what applies, and then using that to identify what are the behavior changes that they want to see happen, what are the policies that may trigger that, setting up then shifting policies and doing tests going forward to do that. So but that all comes through a partnership where you start off by understanding what are the goals, what are the challenges in getting there, what do we need to know, and not thinking about it as, hey, we're gonna do this policy, will you evaluate or come in and tell us how we did, right? And that's the project mentality, which ends up, you can learn a lot, and there's certainly a lot of studies that take that approach. But the partnership approach, I think, is very appropriate,
No.
particularly given the nascency of a lot of the challenges that cities are facing.
No, thanks. Quick follow-up. Both Nino and Marife raised this. It's still for you, Dean. Follow-up to you. Both Nino and Marife raised this issue of fiscal capacity and balancing that with raising revenues within cities, but ensuring that the urban poor are not hurt. Water is a good example. It's been a perennial issue across a lot of ADB and World Bank projects in which water tariffs are meant to show that these projects are going to be sustainable, and yet these are tariffs that have to be paid by poor people. So what to do?
No, this is where, you know, some data can really help, and there's actually administrative data you can get if it's, you know, smart meters, things like this really push the envelope for having a better understanding. When you move prices, who is it that changes behavior and who doesn't? How do you go about targeting? It's actually, in some sense, because there's more administrative data, it's richer the opportunity to do that. But how do you build that into the processes in order to figure out how to optimize that subsidy, and how do you on-ramp and off-ramp people from subsidies? And subsidies can also be at the person or household or business level. They can also be about time of day and things like this, depending on the infrastructure. So they can be very complex, but with good administrative data, that's exactly the kind of thing a partnership would deliver. I would say there's one thing I just want to throw out, though, that you don't need any data for, you don't need anything for: stopping fuel subsidies. That's a no-brainer. It's a political issue. I realize it gets difficult to take that away, but there's clear reasons to, I mean, it's literally the opposite of the policy that is good. The reason why it's hard to stop is because of the politics, but that just means you need to replace it with cash transfers. You don't need, that's just like so simple and clear in the evidence and the theory behind that. And there is a path to actually addressing that, and that's something we just need to figure out how to win the day on the politics and the public opinion on that. We don't need to actually test whether that's bad policy. We know it's bad policy.
Thank you. Nino, I'm going to give you the last word. But before I do that, please think of your questions. We're going to have some time for Q&A from the audience. So please get the little gray cells going, and just start thinking about your questions. But Nino, over to you on just your thoughts on what are the some solutions that you see going forward that are in your experience would work to address some of the key challenges that we've been discussing here. You can pick any one of them, or react to anything else anyone has talked about.
Okay. I would start that very basic answer, but it's in our faces, that's consultation through stakeholders. Because it showed us that this kind of feedback from communities, from private sector, for potential users of the public projects, this kind of feedback has a value, and it always shifts the final outcome into a better solution. For instance, in Georgia's case, when we talk about the livable cities concepts, government was concentrated on water, sanitation, urban upgrades. So this was like a formula for livable cities. But then the community said that, you know what, there is some kind of sport facilities needed because healthy lifestyle is promoted and needed. So you have not thought about it. So this kind of feedback made the government to change the mind, and now I would say last 2-3 years that we are investing in this such kind of infrastructure. So these feedbacks has value, and it should be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much. Let me now open the floor for questions and answers. Well, questions, but I do want one answer from my EBRD colleagues on if you could comment on this issue of lending directly to sub-sovereign that you seem to be more successful at than some of us, we'd be grateful. But think about that. But any other questions from people? Please identify yourself.
Hello, Christoph David Weinmann of Protean Consulting in Malaysia. I'm generally wondering why we don't have urbanists discussing this, right? I think urban planning is an established profession, an established science, and I wonder to which extent maybe we're overlooking what has been developed in that area, because all of the things that we've been talking about on the panel are typical areas that urban planners work on, right? And I remember the ADB even had videotapes, I think VHS in the 1990s, right, talking about urban planning, right? I mean, we have a lot of accumulated knowledge in that area, where I sometimes feel that maybe we begin to forget some of the basic skills that have been developed. So we have people who are able to interact with the population, collect the data. All of that is established since the end of the last century. We have knowledge about how we organize traffic, how we organize urban systems, water planning, et cetera, So I was feeling there was a little absence of that in the discussion, and I wonder whether we have no such planners at the ADB, or the institutions we're working in, because that, of course, would be helpful, right, if we had them, right?
Okay, thanks. We'll gather a couple of other questions. Please, back there. Why don't you take one of the mics from up here, and so that we can get to questions more quickly?
Yeah, good morning. I am Abhinash from DMU, India. So my question is, one is, when we look at the macro picture, so there has to be kind of development of some master plans for the cities, and that's a long-term approach. So urban planning is actually both not only short-term measures, but also long-term measures which we take over a period of like 10 years or something. How do we want to see the city grow? Also the short-term measures which we grapple on a day-to-day basis, like in India, pollution in Delhi. So what are the short-term measures which you that's one of the challenges we are facing in terms of roads and pollution level, water, as you also discussed in the panel. So gradation of like measures based on the challenges we are facing, short-term, medium, and long, the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Over there on that side, please.
Good morning. I'm Ranjit from Sri Lanka. Just to bring some of the historical perspective of urbanization into the discussion. Now, in Sri Lanka, we have seen rural-urban migration as a problem a few decades back. And then we facilitated it because we could provide infrastructure easily within the urban environment. So we promoted moving people to the cities. We provided housing and other relevant infrastructure. But then, what we have seen in the recent past is the social divide in the cities. Rich people are moving out from the cities, and poor people are concentrating into the cities. And then there will be no further support for infrastructure development. And when you look at the issue, although there is a physical infrastructure in the cities, something is seriously lacking: a social infrastructure, social networking, social partnerships. Those things, it's very difficult to provide within the urban setup. So when it comes to the evaluation, are you focusing on the strength of social infrastructure support that you can provide in the urban environment? Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take those questions for now?
May I just add one more question because it's related to the question that was asked. This is from our colleagues on the Pacific table. It's somewhat related to the migration from rural to urban areas. And the question is that should there not be emphasis on rural livelihoods to actually stop this migration or slow it down? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Let's take those for now. There was several questions on urban planning, on this issue of rural to urban migration and the need to balance between rural and urban investments to ensure livability. Who would like to take these questions first? Anyone? Jinten.
Let me take this opportunity to also share with the audience our Tianjin Eco-City model of how planning and development take place in tandem, right? The model that we have is that when we set out to build the Tianjin Eco-City, we want to make sure that it's ecologically sustainable, but it also has to be economically sustainable. So the model that we have is that polluted land is transferred by the government to the private sector. The private sector cleans up the land. The private sector works with the government to do the urban planning to uplift the value of the land. So we put in the parks, the infrastructure, the amenities, the schools, and then with the lifted land value, the private sector sells the homes, develop the land, sells the home, and through that the tax from these sales then goes back to the government, and the local government uses this to then continue to build in more infrastructure. So the process continues. So this is our model in Tianjin Eco-City. I myself is a trained urban planner. I've been with the Singapore government planning authority before I came to Tianjin. And I think the truth is that as good as a very good blueprint of a plan, ultimately the secret sauce is in the implementation. And it's really about bringing the plan onto the ground and making it work. And so I think our experience in Tianjin Eco-City shows that it's really about the implementation, the fine details, and how do you make sure that this thing is sustainable and the government can continue to move the project forward economically, etc. And I think this is something that may not work for every other city or every other model, but it has seemed to work for us for this project. Yeah.
Thanks, Jinten. And Dean?
Tough questions. I have two thoughts. One is on kind of rural-urban migration, rural livelihoods combination. Kind of the economic theory answer is, I think, two-part, as I see it. One is we want a world in which people have more choices. We want to lower transaction costs. So we want to make it so that people can choose rural-urban, and that's costless to migrate back and forth as they wish, except when there's externality differences. I generally don't know. Maybe this is known and I'm just ignorant to it, but I don't know the net positive, negative. Right? Obviously, cities have more congestion and pollution, so we see more negative externalities that way, but there's also positive externalities from having more people in the city, from economic agglomeration and productivity gains. So I don't know the net effect on that. Maybe this is something that others have studied and I just need to be informed. If that's the case, by all means, please, I'd love to see that kind of comparison made to see do we think the net benefit of a migration to urban is a positive or negative on the externalities. Otherwise, I just want to see zero transaction costs as much as possible to empower people and give them the respect of letting them choose where to live. And I say that for what it's worth on a global level, not just local. The hands down, capital moves. I mean, obviously there's capital market failures here and there. I'm not being glib and saying that doesn't exist, but capital moves a lot more easily than people. Like labor is hands down the world's largest market failure. The second thought is on social protection in particular. There's the model of the kind of graduation model of social protection, which we've seen in a lot of parts around the world. We've seen around 35, 40 randomized trials now of this showing fairly strong, consistent long-term results in rural areas. I'm aware of 1.5 studies that have tested this model in urban contexts. Now, I'm going to sound like I'm a little bit contradicting myself. It's a little more complex in the urban context because that model of social protection is a bit of a multifaceted model. Not too many facets, a few facets, but you do too many and implementation kind of gets weak. But what those facets are in a rural context are more systematic. It's a savings and it's an asset transfer and some food security kickers if that's an issue. So it's a little bit more systematic in terms of what it is. In an urban context, if you want to do that same thing and help a household develop a income-generating activity, the best thing for them might be training for a job rather than a livelihood. And so it's a little bit more complex how to do it in an urban setting. I think that's an area that we need to see innovation and testing and understand how to do that in an urban context.
Actually, I was afraid to answer that question, but Mr. Dino already answered. So I also support the idea that people have to have the will to live where they wish to live. I don't know if the Georgia's case is somehow relevant to India. However, I think that this urbanization and migration issue, government cannot solve at once this kind of, let's call it a problem from one side. And only solution, I guess, is to create and to boost economy in that particular area, to create the jobs in order to have the possibility for people to live and create the livelihood in that particular area. We do not neglect the social infrastructure in our cases in Georgia. I was just emphasizing the hot topics and hot infrastructure topics in my speech, but social infrastructure and infrastructure which also supports socializing is a very important in terms of the livable city concept, and it's always included in the concept in Georgia's case.
Thank you. Why don't we take another round of questions back there? So there are two.
Okay.
Go ahead and then Gambhir.
Thank you. The discussion was very interesting, talking about urban planning.
Can you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry. I'm Sumite Chow from Cambodia, Ministry of Economy and Finance. And I just would like to hear more about interactive planning that involve different stakeholders within the government and private sector to come up with very good long-term planning. All right. And one more, just would like to hear your experience on different models of urban planning. One supposed to, the government ownership is less. The government don't have owner on land, and so the role of government in this context is very small. And the other hand, when the government have own all the land, and in these two contexts, how you do interactive planning, right? One, the private sector own everything. How you solve the problem, how you involve, the role of the government to develop the city. And the other one, when the government has power. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Gambhir?
Good morning. My name is Gambhir Bhatta from New Zealand. The question is actually to the colleague that's working on for the Tianjin Eco-City. Considering that Singapore is interested in and has been working in it for about 17 years now, you said, what lesson did you learn from, I think it was Suzhou, where Singapore had been involved in similar kinds of investments some time back, which necessarily weren't very successful, if I'm not mistaken. And more importantly, the colleague from Georgia has talked about the difficulties of transferring lessons from one, successful project, quote unquote, to another. Given the local governance situation in Singapore, how much of that are you able to transfer to Tianjin? Or is the Tianjin EcoCity mostly an infrastructure project, and the other sides of the other issues of governance and so on are sort of, desegregated? Are they sort of separate from what you're talking about? So what lessons did you learn from Suzhou? And is there any issue of transferring local governance aspects to Tianjin? Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question if there is one.
So this is Sanjeev Kumar, Niti Aayog from India. So my question is related to the ULV, urban local bodies. So that I think that local urban bodies plays an important role for the implementation of government's programs and policy. But I think that in a developing country and also in India, they fails to mobilize the resources from the market, as well as there is lack of the capacity building. So I think that, my question is that how can strengthen the local urban local bodies as well as its capacity building so that the programs may be implemented smoothly? That is the questions from my side.
Thank you very much. So Junten, there were a couple of questions for you on Singapore experience, but also I wonder if Marife and maybe Nino could speak to the question of financing local urban bodies.
Just to respond to the question about Tianjin EcoCity, the project started with the concept of bringing Singapore's township development into Tianjin. So township involves building homes, building business parks, jobs, neighborhood centers, etc., into a self-sufficient town into Tianjin. So it really started more from infrastructural, more from a real estate. And I think when the folks that were involved in the project right at the start also recognized that it's impossible to cut and paste something from Singapore into a very different context. So the whole process had a lot of collaboration with local experts. So experts, the Chinese experts in the urban planning, transport planning, etc., such that they are also involved and can shape and adapt some of the best lessons of what worked in Singapore, what it worked in Tianjin, and to kind of formulate what gives the city the highest chance of success. So I think that's how it started. But over time, it has moved beyond an infrastructural project. There's a lot more exchange in terms of software, in terms of management. So in terms of transport management, for instance, in terms of using apps to help residents access services in the city, in terms of building neighborhood clusters whereby services are within easy reach for the residents. So it has moved on to be beyond just an infrastructural project. And I think what we have, just to answer the question about what we have learned, and I think the truth is that China is also growing very fast and advancing in many fronts on the urban front, in terms of urban solutions, in terms of technology, etc. The project started in 2008. We're now into our 17th year. Along the way, we have realized that it's not just about Singapore exporting ideas. Singapore is now also learning from how the Chinese cities are running their cities, using smart technology, using robotics, using autonomous vehicles, etc. So it has become a lot more of a two-way conversation. And in many fronts, the Chinese cities are very advanced in terms of urban systems, using data analytics, etc., than many other places. And so I think it has evolved. The project has evolved from its original start into something that is a lot more adapted to the current times and to the current state of development in North China. Yeah.
Thank you, Junten. Marife?
Thank you. In terms of attracting private sector capital, I think germane,ly, private sector capital will be attracted in sectors that have predictable cash flows, clear revenue models, and manageable risks. So this would actually entail interesting sectors such as water supply and sanitation, urban transport, solid waste management, for example, affordable housing, energy efficiency projects, and the like. Now, in terms of how to enable this, I think we're using several tools such as blended finance, for example, where we try to bring our own capital resources with concessional pockets of money to help the risk, especially early stage investments for further demonstration or replication potentially. We also use a lot of municipal guarantee schemes and credit enhancements, for example, with the use of partial risk guarantees to improve the credit worthiness of subnationals to undertake especially long-term capital-intensive urban development projects. I find it quite effective and efficient to use performance-linked instruments, such as sustainability-linked loans or bonds that are actually designed with service delivery outcomes incentives. And then finally, I think we've seen it work well before, where we do pooled financing mechanisms, where you try to band together several small city urban development projects to achieve economies of scale and risk diversification for private sector capital.
Thanks, Marife. Nino, any last words from you?
I would say that in terms of the urban planning and interaction between the government and the private sector, quite a good example is in our case that government is phasing out big urban upgrade projects. So when government announces the plan to upgrade particular territory, it will, I guess, be planned in several years with several phases. So it allows private sector to also modify its business plan, also think about if the government is investing in that particular area, maybe this is also a good possibility to expand my business, to create new possibilities. So this kind of interaction has been cases in Georgia, and I think that this phasing of this big urban upgrade project could be one of the good examples in our case.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation. I just have one parting observation from my side. And I think it was an earlier question about the questions that we were addressing seemed so basic that you wondered whether any of us had anything to do with urban planning. At least three of us have in fact been working in urban planning, and I think it reflects more the issue that some of the questions are long-term in nature, very long-term, and come back time and again. I was working on I'm an urban economist by training. In the 1970s, I was working on slum upgrading projects all over Asia and the world. And we were dealing with some of the exact same questions of capacity, both at the fiscal and technical level, crowding in the private sector, that we're dealing with now. And I think the lesson is that even in the most developed countries, the issues of livability are going to be with us for a good long time and need continued nurturing. So with that, please join me in thanking our great panel and yourselves for a wonderful session.
Thank you, everybody. Just a quick reminder that tomorrow, same time, same place, we'll have the plenary, Crisis to Resilience, Leveraging Emergency Response for Long-Term Development. It'll be moderated by IEG Sabine Bernabe. And the presentation will be by Nasreen Badari from IED. So please, we look forward to welcoming you here. Thank you.